And welcome to Stacklebeck on Terror. What would you say if I told you that a group whose former members include Osama bin Laden and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and whose founding motto reads in part, "Jihad is our way, dying in the way of Allah is our highest hope," what would you say if I told you that leaders of this same group were guests recently at the White House? Well, get ready to scream, because that's exactly what happened when a delegation from Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood paid a visit to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue earlier this month. That's right. Officials from the group that spawned al-Qaeda and Hamas, and which is really the granddaddy of them all when it comes to Islamic terror groups, were the honored guests of the Obama administration. The Brotherhood delegation met with White House staffers and national security officials. No word on whether they were given a tour of the Oval Office. Now, a White House spokesman said that the Obamis are, quote, broadening their engagement to include many different parties in post-revolutionary Egypt. And a National Security Council spokesman said of the Brotherhood meeting, it is in the interest of the United States to engage with parties that are committed to democratic principles, especially nonviolence. And he apparently said this with a straight face. The Muslim Brotherhood, committed to democratic principles and nonviolence. Look, if you've been watching this show for the past 2 years, you know what the Muslim Brotherhood is all about. And it ain't Jeffersonian democracy and singing Kumbaya around the campfire. This is a group that was steeped in violence from its founding, and whose Palestinian branch, Hamas, has killed countless Israelis, not to mention dozens of American citizens. At the end of the day, the Brotherhood's goals are simple. Sharia law for one and all, whether you like it or not. And the return of the global Islamic superstate or caliphate that we've talked so much about here on the show. They make this clear in their statements and actions. How about this one? From October 2010, from the Muslim Brotherhood's top global leader, Mohammed Badi. He said, the improvement and change that the Muslim nation seeks can only be attained through jihad and sacrifice, and by raising a jihadi generation that pursues death, just as the enemies pursue life. Resistance is the only solution against the Zionist American arrogance and tyranny. And all we need is for the Arab and Muslim peoples to stand behind it and support it. We say to our brothers, the Mujahideen, holy warriors in Gaza, be patient, persist in your jihad, and know that Allah is with you. Pretty strong stuff, right? Not very democratic or nonviolent, is it? But wait, there's more. Oh, yes. The Soviet Union fell dramatically, Badi continued, but the factors that will lead to the collapse of the U.S. are much more powerful than those that led to the collapse of the Soviet Empire. For a nation that does not champion moral and human values cannot lead humanity, and its wealth will not avail it once Allah has had his say. As happened with nations in the past, the U.S. is now experiencing the beginning of its end and is heading towards its demise. Now remember, that's the Muslim Brotherhood's supreme guide and head honcho calling for our destruction. So welcome to the White House. Thanks a bunch for openly praying for our demise, and kudos for calling for a jihad against Israel. You guys have really changed your spots. We can do business with you. You're not like those really bad guys in al-Qaeda. No, no. Muslim Brotherhood, you are reasonable, moderate, tolerant, democratic. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what the Obama administration clearly believes, and this is why they are empowering the Brotherhood from Egypt to Tunisia to Libya and beyond, including right here in the United States. Speaking of which, you gotta figure that the Brotherhood's American fronts like CARE, ISNA, MPAC, the whole alphabet soup of U.S.-based Islamists, they have to be grinning from ear to ear. Think about it. They were just legitimized big time. Members of their mothership in Egypt were guests at the White House. The Brotherhood is now officially mainstream and non-threatening. Thanks, Mr. President. We're going to take a look coming up at how one of the Brotherhood's top American fronts is making major inroads and scoring big victories from coast to coast. But first, I recently sat down with a leading Egyptian dissident who had a warning for the West. Stay away from the Muslim Brotherhood. Unfortunately, that train seems to have left the station. Here's a first-hand look at the Brotherhood's agenda for Egypt Israel and the world. Check it out.
Egyptian native Majid al-Shafi now lives in Canada, where he runs the humanitarian organization One Free World International. He says the Obama administration has miscalculated the Muslim Brotherhood's true intentions.
This administration keeps saying we can deal with the Muslim Brotherhood, we can have a dialogue with Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood is the terrorist mothership for Hamas, for Al-Qaeda, for many of other terrorist groups in the Middle East.
El-Shafi says Brotherhood leaders held a strategy meeting in Cairo just a few days before their recent election victories.
They didn't discuss healthcare, education, economic, finance, any of the important issues to their people. They discussed how they can get rid of Israel. And this is the sad reality.
The so-called Arab Spring, which has seen radical Islamists rise to power in Egypt and across the region, has left Israel increasingly isolated as talk of impending war with Iran heats up.
In any conflict between Israel and Iran, the Muslims, even if there is division between them, the Muslim Sunni and the Muslim Shia, they will agree on one thing: destroying Israel.
El-Shafi travels widely throughout the Middle East and says Muslim persecution of Christians is increasing at an alarming rate.
When you ask why do you do this to the Christians, they say, well, they are the same religion like the West. They are the same religion like the Americans.
El-Shafi knows persecution firsthand. Raised as a Muslim in Egypt, he converted to Christianity at 18 and established a thriving ministry. He was jailed, beaten, and sentenced to death by Egyptian authorities, yet he refused to renounce Christ.
The God of Islam, he sends our children to die for him. But the God of Christianity sent his son to die for us. The method in Christianity of forgiveness and sacrifice make me wonder, wow, that's the Lord that we should worship.
El-Shafi eventually escaped Egypt and made his way to Canada as a political refugee. His organization, One Free World International, is dedicated to helping persecuted Christians around the world.
You know, Reverend El-Shafi is a brave man, and I'm honored to know him. The so-called Arab Spring he talked about has left the Muslim Brotherhood on the rise, and not just in the Middle East, but right here at home. American Muslim pressure groups with ties to the Brotherhood are targeting anyone who criticizes Islamic Jihad or Sharia, and their tactics are working. Here's a look at the most notorious of those groups, the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR.
His courage leading missions in war zones like Iraq, Somalia, and Panama earned him a Bronze Star and Purple Heart. Yet an invitation for retired Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin to speak at a West Point prayer breakfast resulted in anything but a hero's welcome. The Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, joined a coalition of far-left groups in protesting Boykin's appearance due to his supposed Islamophobia. Boykin, a strong critic of radical Islamist groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, eventually withdrew from the event.
In consultation with the faculty, the staff at West Point, who clearly wanted me to withdraw to save the embarrassment of them having to cancel my invitation, I did so.
CAIR, which led the charge against Boykin, has come under major scrutiny from federal authorities in recent years. In 2007, it was named an unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terrorism financing trial in American history. In 2009, a federal judge ruled that, quote, ample evidence exists linking CAIR to the terror group Hamas. And in 2011 congressional testimony, FBI Director Robert Mueller said no formal relationship existed with CAIR because of concerns about the group's national leadership. Nevertheless, CAIR continues as a go-to source for the mainstream media and has seen success lobbying against critics of Islamic supremacy. That power was on full display recently in New York City. CAIR successfully pressured the NYPD to stop showing a documentary called The Third Jihad at counterterrorism training courses. The film, which is narrated by a moderate Muslim, details the rise of Muslim Brotherhood front groups in America.
Third Jihad, by the way, criticizes CAIR and exposes them, so of course they don't want the NYPD to know.
National security expert Ryan Morrow works for the Clarion Fund, which produced The Third Jihad.
The NYPD and government agencies will say, well, if we want to have cooperation with the Muslim community, we have to please CARE.
Pleasing CARE apparently includes preventing testimonies of ex-Muslims. Kamal Salim, a former Islamic terrorist who became a Christian, says his recent speech at a Michigan high school was shut down after the local CARE chapter complained.
People like us talking about their secrets and their ideology and how it's done, they tried to swiftly destroy them.
Now, General Boykin says it all comes down to the first rule of war: know your enemy as you know yourself. He says our leaders are failing that test. You think? We have much more coming up with General Boykin. You're going to see my exclusive interview with him after the break. Stay tuned. And welcome back. You know, it's not very often that you get a chance to sit down with a genuine American hero. I've been lucky enough to get that chance several times over the years from interviewing General Jerry Boykin. General Boykin was a founding member of Delta Force who led missions in Somalia, Iraq, Panama, and many more hostile countries and shed blood for our country. He's the kind of guy you would think would be the perfect guest at West Point Military Academy. But no. When CARE stepped into the picture, General Boykin ran into some serious problems. Here's my exclusive interview with the General. Take a look. Well, General Boykin, welcome to Stackleback on Terror.
Thank you very much, Eric. Glad to be with you.
Always great to have you here. Well, I want to jump right into it. We had a recent controversy. You were supposed to speak at West Point. I think you've earned that right, to say the least. You've served this country more than honorably. So you're supposed to speak at West Point. That didn't happen. Kind of walk us through what exactly did happen and why you didn't end up speaking there.
Eric, the Council of American Islamic Relations has targeted me.
CARE.
Which, as you know, is a criminal organization. They've been identified by our legal system as being a front for the Muslim Brotherhood and a criminal organization. They opposed my appearance there. Now, I was doing a prayer breakfast. My appearance there had nothing to do with Islam, but I was supposed to speak at a prayer breakfast and then at a dinner with some Christian groups. And they opposed me, but they solicited the support of 2 or 3 atheist organizations as well. And they obviously got the support of the mainstream media, which was more than happy to jump on this evangelical Christian, and they created such a mess in terms of media blitz, and so much pressure was put on West Point that in consultation with the faculty, the staff at West Point, who clearly wanted me to withdraw to save the embarrassment of them having to cancel my invitation.
And you handled it so graciously. And you did. You declined to speak. You pulled out. You handled it so graciously. What does this incident tell you about CARE's power right now? CARE is flexing their muscles. If they can get West Point to bend, what's next?
CARE is still very influential, and it is influential primarily because the leadership in America today, and I don't mean just at the national level, but all over, is still catering to CARE, still giving them credibility and giving them the opportunity to wield power in America.
Yeah. And to see West Point bend just really rankles me. And to see CARE, as you mentioned, working with atheist groups. Talk a bit about this unholy alliance, literally with the atheists, between Islamists and the hard left. It's something we've seen develop a lot over the past few years.
Well, it's a common thing. It's a historical thing within Islam where they will partner with and coalesce with any organization that can help them achieve their objectives, and then they will turn on them when they have accomplished whatever they set out to accomplish. And the homosexuals, the liberals, the environmentalists, the Marxists, they will partner with them, and then those people will become the targets of their wrath.
Yeah, General, that's the Iran 1979 model, the Ayatollah Khomeini. The Marxists, the leftists helped him get to power. Once he came to power, threw them all in jail and executed them. So much more to come up. We got to go to commercial now. Much more coming up with General Jerry Boykin. Stay tuned. And welcome back. We're talking to General Jerry Boykin, our good friend, and General, we're talking about the incident, the fiasco, I hate to say, at West Point, and you're a longtime military man. What do you see now in the ranks of the U.S. military in terms of grasping this Islamist threat? Do you think in the hierarchy at the Pentagon, do you think they really get the ideology that we're up against?
Well, the average soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine understands this a lot better than you might think. Unfortunately, the leadership of the military has been directed. It's not just by this administration, it was the last administration too. They've been directed to essentially deny the realities of what we're up against. They are today, as you may well know, in our military, there are terms you can't use like radical Islam and Islamic extremist and jihad.
Jihad is a spiritual struggle.
Jihad is a spiritual struggle. So, you know, Sun Tzu said, know yourself, know your enemy, and you need not fear 1,000 battles. We have a military today that is suppressed and that is not allowed to know the enemy.
Yeah. And you've been in the trenches against this very enemy, General. I mean, it has to bother you to see that. Like you said, first rule of war, know your enemy. Do you see this getting better in our intelligence community, in the military ranks? Is it going to get better, or are we going to slide more down this slope, this dangerous slope of political correctness?
Sadly, I think it's the latter. As you know, Eric, we are not doing better in terms of how our Justice Department is dealing with homegrown terrorism. When they refuse to identify the extremist Islamic theology as being part of the problem, then you're not going to get a true understanding of what we're dealing with. And what we're allowing to happen is we're allowing these criminal organizations like CAIR and ISNA, the Islamic Society of North America. And
these are Muslim Brotherhood front groups.
All Muslim Brotherhood front groups.
The Brotherhood's own documents say it.
That's right. They've been identified by the Muslim Brotherhood as being elements of the Muslim Brotherhood. They are growing in influence, and the greater their influence, the less willingness we have within our government to recognize exactly what we're up against. And until we do, we cannot win.
And General, as you said, our government has these Muslim Brotherhood documents in their possession naming these groups. So they know what the plan is, but yet we see this administration in particular literally promoting the Brotherhood agenda across the Middle East and North Africa. Do you think our government has made a calculus, a faulty calculus, that the Brotherhood is a moderate, reformed group that we can work with?
Well, I think there are some in our government that know the truth, but they are playing the administration's game with this issue. There are others who have bought the propaganda of the Muslim Brotherhood, which says that it's only a fringe element that we have to fear, when in fact it's just the opposite. There are Muslims in America that do not support Sharia, that don't support the Muslim Brotherhood. But instead of coming along beside those people, we actually spend all of our time and energy supporting and cavorting with the very entities that want to destroy us, and those are the Muslim Brotherhood fronts.
Yeah, like you said, General, there are moderate Muslim voices. A guy like Zuhdi Jasser, for instance, American Islamic Forum for Democracy, a great American, served in the military honorably, speaks out against jihad, speaks out against Sharia. He cannot get an audience at the White House. Yet we have the likes of the Islamic Society of North America, a Muslim Brotherhood front group, getting audiences with top officials in the Obama administration.
Well, let's just take, for example, I couldn't go to West Point and speak there. But after Nadal Hassan killed 13 people at Fort Hood, the very next week, a guy named Louis Safi, who is a known associate of the Muslim Brotherhood, was there teaching cultural awareness to our troops. Now, I couldn't speak to future officers in the American Army, but Louis Safi was there teaching them what they needed to know before they deployed into Iraq and Afghanistan. Go figure. How does that look in terms of the influence of the extremist elements?
Yeah, General, we reported about that here on Stackleback on Terror. Just a few weeks after Hassan's massacre at Fort Hood, a known Muslim Brotherhood operative instructing U.S. troops deploying to Iraq and Afghanistan about what real Islam is. You can't make this stuff up. But General Jerry Boykin, thank you so much for joining us. It's always an honor to have you here, and everyone needs to pick up his great book, never surrender. Coming up, Texas Congressman Louis Gohmert sounds off about the Obama administration's handling of the Muslim Brotherhood. Stay tuned.
Remember to check out the Stacklebeck on Terror blog at cbnnews.com 24/7 for the latest on these and other stories.
And welcome back. You know, there's a handful of people on Capitol Hill who get it when it comes to the Islamic terror threat. Michelle Bachmann and Alan West, both of whom have been featured on this show. Peter King, Sue Myrick, Trent Franks, and Texas Congressman Louis Gohmert. The former judge always tells it like it is, and he joined us recently to discuss Muslim Brotherhood infiltration. Take a look.
There was a great scene in the movie Patton where Patton's tanks defeated Rommel's tanks, and he screams out something like, you know, I read your book. That's how you know your enemy. That's how you can defeat your enemy. You know what they're thinking. You study how they think. And now we have such a politically correct, compliant FBI lexicon now that they are not understanding, they're not being taught the way these terrorists think. They've completely eliminated the terminology that allows you to understand what they are. They bring in named co-conspirators into the White House, into the State Department, into the inner circles up here of agencies that should be protecting us.
Thanks again to Congressman Gohmert for being a watchman on the wall for our nation. And thanks for joining us for another edition of Stacklebeck on Terror. Until next time, take care and God bless.